Okay, so my name is Ken Campbell, and I'm with CCTS, the University of Kentucky. And what I'm going to do in this short video is demo a consent system that Marietta Barton Baxter and I have developed that allows us to get a IRB approved consent from a participant without actually having any physical contact. So that really works for us by phone contact with the participant and the participant filling out a consent form using a Redcap. So let me try and explain how this works. So the process starts by making a new record. So we'll add a new record, and each record has 4 potential instruments. The patient demographics one, that's how the process starts. That is really where somebody has identified a potential participant and they fill that information out there enough for you to alert a research coordinator. The research coordinator will then do this pre-consent instrument. When they complete the pre-consent instrument, that will send an email to the participant. So that's done as the informed consent instrument, and that's going to be a Redcap survey, and many of us fill out many of these things all the time. And then finally, after the consent's been completed, the coordinator can come back and document the process. So let me start by filling out the patient demographics. So in our workflow, this form is filled out by a clinician who identifies a potential participant. So the participant would be a patient in this case. This would be, in our case, in the ICU. So the patient's called Jane B. Doe. They have a date of birth that was 20 years ago. They have an MRN. And a little wrinkle that's specific to our workflow. We have patients who are pretty sick and might not be able to give consent themselves. And in that case, the consent has to be obtained from a legally authorized representative. And so we've got some branching logic that allows us to do that. So is the participant on a ventilator? Well, if they are, straight off, you have to try and get consent from the legally authorized representative. So you would fill out their name here. If you go no, we've got some other questions. They have altered mental status. Is the patient unable to access technology? No. And so 3 no's would mean the consent has to be sought directly from the participant. So you'd be going for the consent for Jane Doe. But just to show you the full functionality here, I'm going to go yes, they are. And so now we're going to try and get consent for John Doe for the patient Jane Doe. And so now we've got a contact number, and this is the contact number. In this case, it's for the LAR. If you're getting consent directly from the participant, the contact number is going to be for Jane Doe. So the clinician marks that form as complete. It's pretty simple, and they go save. So now you've completed that instrument. Now, using the alerts and notifications feature, we've got an alert set up to send an email, in this case to biospecimens@uky.edu for new participant identified. So if we go over to my email, and that worked pretty well. So now this email, it just came through. You can see it's 1:38. This email just arrived. So we've got an email alert that says Jane Doe is a new potential participant. So you can send that email to your coordinator. So now what happens is the coordinator will log into Redcap, and they are going to go to the pre-consent form. So our coordinator is called Scratch Wildcat. That's who's doing our consent. And In this case, the consent will be obtained from the legally authorized representative, who's John Doe. So at this point, Scratch will have called up John Doe and the contact number from the prior form, and they will have said, Mr. Doe, I'm from CCTS. We're, interested in learning if your wife, Jane Doe, is interested in participating in this research study. So it's just a very brief initial call about, are you interested in learning more? If you are interested in learning more, then we get an email address for the contact. And so now I'm going to go kscamp3@g.uky.edu, so another email, and I'm going to click yes. So I'm going to send the email to the person providing consent, and we go complete. So now we go save and exit. And if everything has gone like it should, over here, so now we get an email. So this is now the patient or the participant or the legally authorized representative email address, and they get this email, and you can put whatever text you want in this email. But the critical thing is that it's got a link to an informed consent document. So now the coordinator is going to arrange a time to be on the phone or potentially on Zoom with the person providing consent. They're going to click on this link, and it's going to take them to a web page. So here's the web page. I'll make it a little bit larger. And all this is a screenshot of the normal consent form. So this is just an image file of the consent form, and PDF will generate your images directly. And we've got a little bit of personalized piping in here, so we can actually pre-fill some of this in. So, just a title here, this is the informed consent form for participant Jane Doe. So this URL up here is personalized to this specific consent. So what you would do is you would talk through with the person providing the consent. So you're doing this on the phone or on Zoom. You get to the bottom, you click next page. And in our case, the consent is a horrifying 7 pages. I wish we could make it shorter. But you would talk through them just like you're doing a normal consent. And you get down to the bottom. And the last page is where you would normally doing a physical sort of ink signature. But in our case, what we've got is we've got some extra fields at the end. So this is pre-filled out with the information we provided earlier. So here's the participant's name, Jane Doe. Here's the person, the LAR, John Doe. Scratch Wildcat is the coordinator that's on the phone talking the participant through. These are required to be on the consent form. The participant has to do 2 things. They have to date the consent form, and they have to add their signature. And so you can, do whatever you can here on the signature. That's kind of what mine looks like when I try and sign on one of the if I'm buying my bagels or something, that's about as good as my signature gets. So you save the signature. You go to the next page, and now you get a PDF generated, and the PDF is basically what you've just seen. So this is just a documentation of the PDF, but down at the bottom, we've got the signature, the date, and the name. And so the participant can look at this and go, yep, I certify that all of this is correct. And then they go submit. And if they want, they can click on the download button, but they will also have got a copy of the consent form emailed to their contact address. So to show that, we can go back here, and if we're lucky, probably as I'm sitting here, this will come through. The other thing we can do is we can look at the CCTS Biospecimens email, and we can see if anything came through there. So my experience in trying to do these demos is that the delay between submitting the form and waiting for the email is anything between about 2 seconds and about a minute. And generally when I'm trying to record the video live, it's about a minute. So we'll come back to that shortly. Well, there's one that came back. So there's an email that came back and it said the new consent was obtained. And here was the participant name, Jane Doe, and date of birth. And I think I probably forgot to fill out the MRN or something like that. But that's a personalized email that's coming back, going to whoever you alert. And so that could be a trigger for somebody, for example, to go and collect a specimen from somebody. And over here in this email address, let's see if that has come through. There you go. So now this is the email that went back to the participant. And so here's some documentation in there, and you can see there's some piping. So it actually filled in their email. And if we click on this, here's a PDF that is their completed consent form. And so down at the bottom is the signature. So that actually worked pretty smoothly. So now I can close that. I can close that. I can close that, and if I refresh this, you'll see that now the informed consent has been updated, so that you can click on that and you can get basically what we just saw. So this is all the stuff that was just filled out in the survey. There you go. And the other thing you can do is you can go into the documentation of remote consent, and again, this is the coordinator doing a follow-up. And they could go, okay, this is what happened in the consent. We did it today. I contacted Jane Doe. They were Hispanic. They were American Indian. The consent form was received by the participant, or yes, it was. They were the spouse. No other people were present during the consent. The consent was reviewed. The person providing consent had questions. Yes, they were. Will they take organs was a question they had. We did this using phone and using Redcap. And if at the end the person had said, no, I don't want to participate and I declined to fill out the form, they can click yes. But if you got a valid consent, you could click no, and that would be your documentation of the consent process. You already have the consent in hand at that point, but this is a documentation of what happened. And again, this sort of part of it is probably going to depend on your specific workflow. And the last thing I want to say is if you go over here in the file repository, I should save the changes. If I go here to the file repository and I click on the PDF survey archive, you can see that it's 147 now, but I've been talking for too long. And so at 142, this survey was completed. This is the record number for Jane Doe, and here is the PDF that we just got. And if I open that, that's it. And that's our documented consent. So I think that was all I wanted to really tell you. I probably don't have the bandwidth to support everybody who might want to set up this consent, but I can try to answer questions, and I've shared this instrument with Biomedical Informatics, and I'm happy to share it with you. It's all using Redcap standard tools. It's just there's a lot of options and buttons, and when you copy it across to somebody else, not all of the settings are preserved, so you have to go through it and basically practice. Well, the way I would do it is I would practice just like I did and try and run through the documentation. I suspect that each study will have a different sort of workflow on the demographics and the pre-consent and so on. But I think the useful bit of this is the ability to send a consent form as that's approved by the UK IRB as a survey so that it can be filled out remotely by a research participant. That's it. I'm easy to find on Google. If you need to email me with questions, I'm Ken Campbell in the Department of Physiology. Okay, and CCTS. That's it. Thank you for your time, and I hope that was useful.